Hello, everybody. My name is Dr. Kai Peven. I'm a naturopathic and Chinese medicine doctor with a practice here in the Ballard neighborhood in Seattle. I'm doing this talk as part of the Seattle Entrepreneur Networking Community's Health Week. And I want to just run through some basic self-care ideas, what I like to call professional self-care for all of you entrepreneurs out there. And this is really basic stuff. So you're probably familiar with some of these things because we all do them every day. So let's start with kind of something that we all know about, which is food and eating. There's a lot of different diets, ideas about nutrition, ways to, gain weight, ways to lose weight, ways to be fit, all around food and eating and nutrition. I take an approach that comes primarily from traditional diets, which is if there was a way that a group of humans ate that sustained that group of humans for 10 generations, it's probably a sustainable diet. One of the troubles is that in our modern time, the diet that we eat now has not sustained us for 10 generations. We're maybe 3, maybe 4 generations in, depending on who you're talking to. So here's a couple of really basic food and eating habits. First and most important is that you eat whole foods, or what I like to call food. A lot of what we eat today is not actually food anymore. And one of my favorite descriptors of what we eat now comes from Michael Pollan, the author and writer, who calls them food-like products. So you want to stick with real whole food and stay away from processed food as much as possible. There's a couple of basic rules. Again, I'm kind of stealing from Michael Pollan here. Stick to foods that have 5 or less ingredients. The best is if there's 1 ingredient, which is the food. Stay away from foods that have lists of chemicals in the ingredient list. No junk food, highly processed foods, things that come, that come in shapes that don't grow on trees or on plants. Be really careful with refined oils. And unfortunately, this is most cheaper restaurant food is cooked in refined oil. It's really not good for you. And then, especially in the winter, we're moving into summer now, it's not as big a deal, but especially if you have a weaker digestive system, you want to stick to warm foods. So you want to be careful with raw or cold food. And in the handout that will be accompanying this video, you'll see some information about what a warming foods diet looks like. Number 2 rule, no distracted eating. When you're eating, just eat. Don't eat and work at the same time, because if you want to digest your food well and absorb the most nutrition from your food, then you need to eat and not do other things. So the worst is when you're like walking around and eating, or when you're driving and eating, even, working, like reading something or working on the computer while you eat, it's not the best. Really, the only activity that is a healthy accompaniment to eating is socializing, because when you interact with people, that's also kind of like a type of food. That's a relational food. I want to put a word in there about orthorexia, which is, you may have heard of anorexia, which means that it's a disease that involves not eating enough. Orthorexia is when you are overly obsessed with eating correctly. This has become very common, and you may want to notice if you find in yourself that you get anxious about eating the right things. This might be a sign to kind of reevaluate your relationship to food. Food is meant to nourish us. If you're worried about eating the right kind of food, it's not going to be as nourishing. You won't be able to really kind of absorb and take in what is good about the food. Lastly, and this kind of goes back to that, piece about the refined oils, but also about just being able to absorb proper nourishment from food. it's really helpful to eat at home. If you eat out all the time, uh, number one, quality of food is often not as good. Number two, you're outsourcing your nourishment to people that are, maybe they're there to nourish you, but they're also there to make money, which is not the same thing. So, do try, and, if you don't have a kitchen at home, obviously that's, that's something that is important to take into account. But eating at home and making food for yourself is really important. Okay, next piece. So we talked a little bit about food, diet, eating. Next is movement. And I say movement and not exercise because actually movement is more important. Movement doesn't have to be exercise. And because so many of us now sit in one place for hours at a time, I mean, here I am sitting. Getting up and moving regularly is really, really important to keep things flowing well in the body. So, even when you're just sitting, get up every hour and move around, stretch a little bit, jump up and down, maybe do a push up, whatever it is. A little bit of movement on a consistent basis will bring you better benefits than lots of movement or heavy exercise more sporadically. So, if you're going to move for 30 minutes for your whole day, it's better to break that up into little 5-minute chunks than to do it all at once, because then you get more movement spread out through your day. You should feel better after movement. If you feel worse, then you're probably overdoing it, or you're doing it at the wrong time. Movement, especially heavier exercise, is best done during daylight hours. It's, I know there are folks who love to work out after work when it's dark out already in the evening, but as far as the body's physiology and, how your hormones work, it's generally better to work out during the daytime, because that is when you're going to be already activated. It's when your stress hormones are up. That's when you're ready to go. Humans are diurnal animals. We sleep when it's dark out. So being active when it's light gives you the best fit. It's one way that I like to gauge the intensity of exercise is by how much you're sweating. If you're someone that doesn't feel good if you sweat too much, or if you're someone who sweats very easily, like, as soon as you start walking, you start to sweat. What that probably means is that sweating is not going to be very sustainable for you. And so you want to limit your activity to below or at the threshold for sweating. If you get a really good sweat on, you feel great afterwards, and you're the kind of person where really, sweating more vigorously is going to be helpful. There's more nuance there, but just be aware that, you may hear that, sweating really hard is good for you. That's not true for everybody. If you don't feel good after you sweat heavily, then moderate your activity so that you stay at or under that sweating threshold. Other ways to move are internal movement. So instead of using physical movement to get the blood flowing, to get circulation going, you can use some different hydrotherapy techniques. Those will be in the handout that is accompanying the video. You can take a look at those. Those are all really safe and can be done every day if you want to. So next section, we talked about food. We've talked about movement. The next is sleep. Sleep is incredibly important, right? I think everybody knows that sleep is required. And this is not just for humans, but actually most animals that have been studied have some kind of circadian rhythm, and they sleep for a part of the day. The way you know that you are sleeping well is you fall asleep easily, you stay asleep easily, and you wake up feeling rested. It's pretty basic. Of course, it's really easy for those not to be the case. And I would maybe even say that, many people do not have good sleep under that definition. So, there's various ways in which sleep can be disturbed. People cannot be sleeping well. I'm not going to go into all of those on this video because we don't have time. But there's some basic rules for what we call sleep hygiene, which is how to set yourself up for good sleep, how to make sure that your environment is conducive to sleep. Because, a couple hundred years ago, there's no electric light. Everything was much quieter. If any of you have gone camping, you'll have experienced this too. Once the sun goes down, activity kind of just stops. There's not much to do. What are you going to do? You go to sleep. But these days, with our modern lifestyles, there's so much that can distract and contribute to poor sleep. Light being the number one factor, and we are surrounded by artificial light. So, first rule is you need darkness to sleep well. And ideally, you have at least an hour to 2 hours of darkness before you go to sleep. Screens count. Screens are actually a huge source of light in the evening, especially blue light, that bright, like white light that comes from screens, very disruptive to sleep. You're going to have a hard time falling asleep if you're being exposed to that kind of light in the evening. So the best rule is no screens for a minimum of an hour before bed. If you are on screens, use a blue light blocker. So there's glasses, there's apps that you can download that will block the blue light from your screens. There's, night shift on mobile devices these days. Make sure that you use those tools so that you don't have blue light exposure at night. Making sure that once you're in your bedroom and you're going to sleep, that the bedroom is as dark as possible. So you may live in the city, you may live somewhere where there's a street light directly outside of your bedroom window. Spend a little bit of time and effort and maybe a little bit of money and set up your bedroom so that all artificial light is blocked. Get some blackout curtains. Don't have those any kind of electronic device in the room that has a little green power light or a little blue power light. Like those are all going to be disruptive to your sleep. Sleep masks that only cover the eyes are not enough because our skin has light sensors in it that can detect light. So you do really want the bedroom to be as dark as possible. Another piece which you'll see in sort of in sleep hygiene, when people will talk about sleep hygiene, is to make sure that the bed is for sleeping and for sex only. So if you're having trouble sleeping, don't do other things in bed. Don't read in bed. Don't watch TV in bed. If you're doing those things, whether you're getting ready to fall asleep or because you can't fall asleep, get out of the bed so that you associate the bed only with sleep. A couple of tips and tricks. If you wake up in the middle of the night, and I'm talking after 3 to 5 hours of sleep, like you go to sleep at 11, you wake up at 3 in the morning, that means that your blood sugar is dropping. So if you are that person, have a small snack before bed, enough food to fit in the palm of one hand, and no refined carbs. So cookies don't count. I'm talking like some nuts, some dried fruit, something that is a little more substantial with a little bit of protein in it. That will help you sleep better. On the other hand, if you have trouble falling asleep, if you've eaten a large meal or you tend to have heartburn at night, if you're eating late and you have heartburn when you lay down, that means you need to not eat before bed. Maybe give yourself 2 to 3 or even 4 hours so that when you go to sleep, your stomach is empty, and that will help you sleep better. Because if you eat a large meal, then your body's busy digesting. It's going to be harder to fall asleep. There are also some hydrotherapy treatments that can help you with sleep, which are going to be in the handout. Warming your feet up before you go to sleep is super helpful, as is the slightly more complex and involved warming socks treatment, which again, you can read about. The other piece about light and sleep is not just reducing light, especially blue light in the evening, but getting full spectrum sunlight during the day will be very helpful. This is not something that is always immediately apparent, but over time, if you don't get enough light during the day, it will mess up your circadian rhythm, and then it will be, your sleep patterns can become disturbed. And I think I will end it there. The handout will have a little bit more information in it. Please, direct questions to me. I'm always happy to answer questions. If you have more involved questions, feel free to shoot me an email or give me a call. I'm always available and happy to talk about any of these, sort of basic self-care related issues, or if you have something more serious going on, please reach out.